Hi, I'm Dr. Barber. Today, I want to talk to you about culture awareness and culture intelligence. This is very important because culture is a mechanism that can improve organizational effectiveness. It is also a mechanism that can help you learn how to work across different backgrounds, different cultures, regardless of the sector that you're in, whether it's academics, government, disaster recovery. um, whether you're trying to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organization, culture intelligence and awareness becomes critical. And so today I want to take some time to talk to you about that. Culture intelligence is a model or framework that allows organizations to work effectively in culturally diverse situations. It's actionable with controls to ensure that accountability is in place to improve effectiveness. It helps you to be able to work across boundaries, and I think I already mentioned to you that it's also important in terms of being able to work across different backgrounds. So culture intelligence it becomes very important. Culture intelligence also ensures that leaders and organizations are attuned to different values and beliefs. And that's important because, and just think about what we're doing in the diversity space, for example. Um, as you kind of better understand those different backgrounds, it also gives you a better appreciation for how things have systemically become barriers to equity or quality outcome over time. Um, and again, this just also allows organizations to just develop more innovative solutions and to really leverage those different backgrounds and culturally diverse populations. Four key areas that I use this for: adaptability, mission, involvement, and consistency. I do use a research-based approach to get after this, and as you can see in the model on the screen here, each area has sub areas, and I won't get into all of those here on the slide, but this slide really gets into the science behind what drives organizational performance, um, how to better understand the differences of background, and actually to help you celebrate the presence of difference. This is a very effective framework that I use. Now, there's a couple ways you can use this. You can use this via a survey instrument where I would generate about I don't know 40 to 45 questions. Um, over it takes about maybe 15 to 20 minutes for an employee to take the survey. Uh, that survey generates a culture score, and I'll kind of get into this a little bit later in the briefing. Based off of that culture score, it gives me the framework to really generate an action plan needed to kind of help improve culture, improve organizational effectiveness, and really drive results for the organization. But this here is the core model. I briefly mentioned that you can do this a few different ways. You can do it via a survey. I've also taught organizations how to do it just via rapid focus groups, so you don't have to worry about trying to launch the entire survey mechanism. I can teach you how to do it just by writing in leadership principles into performance management system. So there's some flexibility with how we can use components of this model to really drive culture improvement, drive improving diversity. A lot of flexibility with how we can get it done. The mission component of this model, is what employees need to know, what they're expected to do and why. When mission is clear, it's aligned. There's a visible line of sight between near-term and long-term priorities. There's risk to this particular area of the model also because lower scores in this area indicate ambiguous priorities, priorities that are not agreed upon. There's a high risk of activity without focus and failing to achieve desired results. This area, I believe, has about I think eight questions or so, but this is a very important part of the model. Well, all of them are important, but this is why this part is particularly important. As you listen to me talk about this model, you'll understand that there are levers to each area of the model that actually really helps to get at the root cause of why there might be issues in the organization as it relates to culture. Consistency, maximize execution in the workplace. It is important to be able to work across various boundaries and eliminate silos. Core values set clear behavioral expectations when practiced and reinforced. Difficult problems and issues must be resolved and agreement reached. The risk to this area, uh, this particular trait is closely linked to performance metrics such as operating efficiency, quality, employee engagement. Lower scores in this area indicate silos may be prevalent. Teams may be working in conflict with one another or too focused on narrow priorities. Key issues may be left unresolved, no action is taken. Values are unclear or behaviors inconsistent with the values are tolerated. This is one of the areas that I get the lowest scores consistently in because what I've seen, what I've come to learn is in most organizations, you just have the silo effect where teams don't talk to each other that's on the left and the right. And so this is an area where you see a lot of low scores. Involvement. This is an area that can also be used to really zero in and focus in on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, this I use this area a lot to also kind of monitor uh, and measure empathy. Um, so this is an area where you measure employee empowerment, you measure team orientation, capability development. This this area is very critical because this is also linked to a lot of results that you see in exit surveys as to why organizations may be leaving an organization. I've used this area also to help me improve how an organization builds an inclusive work environment. So this is a very key area as it relates to diversity also and organizational effectiveness. Adaptability. High performing organizations go beyond responsiveness and proactively look for new and improved ways to do work. Successes and failures are considered learning opportunities, and a safe environment exists for risk taking. This trait is closely linked to innovation, customer satisfaction, and growth. Lower scores in this area indicate that change may be met with resistance and cynicism. Risk aversion is the norm. The needs to the customer are not clearly understood, or the needs may be ignored as decisions are made. So when you talk about adaptability, really we're talking about change. And I think we all can understand that change is not easy. It's not always well received. And so if you really want to get after improving organizational learning, teaching your organization how to really create change, this is the component of the model that really helps you to get after that. So I use a global benchmark uh, when creating the actual culture score. And so the way this works is the survey is launched, the 40 plus questions are taken, and then once I get those results, I take those results and I work with a company called Dennison Consulting, and those scores are benchmarked against thousands of organizations because we've used this model for years and years with thousands of organizations. And so those scores are benchmarked, um, and then the scores are reported in percentiles as you see here. So the more color in the wheel, the better the culture, the better the climate, the better the organizational effectiveness is. The less color in the wheel, that kind of gives us some indicators where we need to kind of go in and help with culture, where we can help with organizational effectiveness and other things of that nature. So again, survey is taken, benchmarked against thousands of organizations and thousands of survey results, and generates this particular score, which is reported in percentiles. So, in addition to those four core traits, there's actually an opportunity for us to add additional areas to the model based off your organization's needs, and also a post-survey capability because you don't want to just take the survey one time and then wait 18 months to take it again. You want to be able to kind of measure results along the way, and so we have the ability to do that also. Some other models that you can actually add in are you can measure leadership effectiveness. You can measure specifically with innovation or trust, engagement and commitment. I really like that trust component. Just think about what we're going through with the pandemic, what we kind of went through with some of the political tension with recent elections, current events. So being able to really rebuild trust and communication is very, very near and dear to me. As as we go through trying times, you want to be able to really stay connected to your workforce, and trust is going to be able to allow you to do that. You also have some other things that you can look at in terms of risk, safety. We've already foot stomped diversity, equity, and inclusion, sustainability, and digital transformation. So these are just some other areas that you can actually add to the model, or even look at with with a more targeted focus. Here is an example of how we would measure some of those additional areas, such as risk management and diversity, equity, and inclusion. You can see how you have questions that are kind of bucketed here at the top. Risk management gives you about 10 questions. If you were to look at safety, safety is going to give you about 12 questions. Diversity, equity, inclusion gives you, I think, 10 questions there. Same concept. Once you answer those questions, those results are benchmarked against that normative database with thousands of organizations who have taken the survey over years, and it's going to generate scores in each area. So you see the score at the bottom there for risk, and you see the survey down there for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so based off of those scores, I would actually go back and look at my repository of the thousands of action plans that I've created before. And that's going to give me the ability to kind of quickly generate a recommended action plan, or recommended get well strategy for your organization. That could be tweaked, based off of the organization's preference. But this just gives me a measure to be able to do that. This is how you link culture to leadership. This we can actually generate a leadership effectiveness index for you. When combined with the culture survey, it offers a unique opportunity to capture both culture and leadership data simultaneously. The index leverages data collected from over 25,000 leaders across the globe. Insights allow organizations to surface relationships between leadership and culture, and shape leadership development efforts to strengthen business performance. Similarly to what I showed you with how we generate that score, once we incorporate this particular index, it pulls from those different levers from the culture model and generates this leadership effectiveness score for you, as you see on the screen here. And in a similar fashion, we would generate a get well plan or a get well strategy to kind of help you with leadership effectiveness. Here's how that developing an action plan, or how that get well strategy process would work for you. Launch the survey, receive those results, analyze the results, design the action plan based off of those results. We want to present that action plan to your respective leadership, launch the action plan, report progress of how you're doing with that plan on a regular basis, monitor to ensure the action plan improves effectiveness, organization, and improves culture and climate. And then, over time, if you really want to monitor to see how this framework is working, determine the periodicity so you can launch that survey again. And I promise you'll watch those scores get better and better each time that you launch the survey. And that is how you build culture intelligence in your organization. Any strong culture intelligence should have this component built in to ensure that your workforce understands that their voice was heard, and that as leaders we're taking the right action. So I've had an opportunity to lecture at Harvard on a number of occasions, and so what I want to do this morning is kind of share with you one of my lectures there, and how I kind of talked about culture intelligence and how it can be used to really improve organizational effectiveness and also leadership at any organization. So let's take a look. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I know that I'm the individual that stands before you guys on a free weekend, so with that being in mind, I will be mindful of your agora and the echoes in the room. But seriously, so we've had very rich discussions on a number of topics as touch points to transformational leadership. We heard Reverend Brown talk about the urban transformation efforts that are taking place here in Boston. We heard Dan talk about distinctive styles of leadership, and several of you kind of mentioned that you're having challenges with organizational culture, in your organization. So hopefully with what I showed you today in this brief, and also with you reflecting on what we kind of discussed here in class, and also reflecting on some of the challenges you guys have had in your respective organizations. I think, what I had in this brief, I think that will help you all out tremendously. Transformational leadership resonates very soundly with me. I studied transformational leadership at I-DIEM University, and I'll share a little bit more about that because some of the focus areas of transformational leadership I have a lot of touch points with some other things that we talked about here also. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get right into it. So before you can fully understand the impacts of transformational leadership, you first have to ask yourself, what is transformational leadership? So on the slide, you see two definitions, but I won't drain the slide. Instead, I just want to pivot your attention to the outputs of transformational leadership because it kind of sums up what transformational leadership is all about. So for starters, we have vision. So in order to truly appreciate vision as it respects to transformational leadership, leaders have to be extremely efficient communicators. You have to be able to communicate both orally and written. But if you're not able to communicate to your workforce why it is important with what they're doing and how it translates to the long-term mission and to the vision, then you have a chance to be ineffective. So communication as it relates to vision is extremely important. Next on the slide, you see motivation and you see inspiration, and you also see the small connector there. That's because in a lot of cases, we have a tendency to use those two terms. So I know right now this video is talking about transformational leadership, but you're going to see how the principles of transformational leadership are linked to that culture model that I just spoke to you about. So, but these terms are similar. There are a lot of differences. So, for example, motivation is that external factor that triggers an individual to act or behave a certain way. While inspiration is that burning desire inside that prompts you to act a certain way. So, as a leader myself, when I kind of keep these two separate, I kind of think of inspiration as being the seed, motivation being the water. But you can plant as many seeds as you want to plant, but you need that water to make it grow. So as leaders, it's important that you keep those two topics, differentiated. Change leadership. We've all had to manage new requirements and new so they were pushed down to us from management or from leadership. But as a change leader, you can't wait on things to be pushed down to you. You have to identify those areas that require change or need change. So change leadership is critical. Systems thinking. A lot of you probably look at systems thinking as looking at processes from an end-to-end perspective. Well, from what I've learned with transformational leadership, you can also look at it as a cross-functional process management approach. So, if you have awards on one end of the spectrum, retirements, promotions, those process owners may be in the habit of just only thinking about those work streams respective to those processes from an end-to-end perspective. Well, from a cross-functional management perspective, if you stack those processes and look at where those processes intersect, then you have a more likelihood of getting those process owners to talk and communicate. And it gets them out of just working out of the silos. And lastly, the last little bit of leadership development. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I do want to point your attention to the call-out box because I have three terms that in my opinion, are key differentiators for this style of leadership. So, charisma. Charisma is the charm that you use to kind of inspire the devotion of others. You have interpersonal skills, that's just understanding relationships with others, and empathy. Just being able to share and understand feelings of others. But I will tell you, you get that part right, then you have a more high likelihood of getting workforce to respond to you. And we have to get out of the habit of just, sitting behind the desk and not going out to visit the workforce. Get up behind that desk and go and talk with your workforce. Don't talk at them, go and talk with them. And if you use those three terms that I just mentioned to you, you have a better chance of getting that done. What does transformational leadership look like? What does this style of leadership look like? So, as I studied transformational leadership at Boston Graduate University, as a part of my dissertation project, I actually created a transformational leadership framework. And the reason being, if I'm going to mentor young professionals, if I'm going to consult organizations or give advice as to how to infuse this leadership capability, I need a framework that's going to give you left and right minutes.
So what you see on the screen is my first swag at greatness particular framework. Now, with any leadership style, it's not a cookie cutter approach. There's not a right or wrong answer. So this is Chuck Barker's swag and what I think this leadership style looks like. So in the gray box, you see Lean Six Sigma. And I think all of you are familiar with this particular framework. It's an industry-wide recognized credential. This gives you the opportunity and then the skills to identify process improvement efforts for existing processes. And it also helps you to create new processes if needed. The only problem with Lean Six Sigma is sometimes it can be a little bit rigid. So it's tough for me to go to Antonio's workspace and say, hey, Antonio, this process is jacked up. I think you can do X, Y, and Z to improve it. See what I mean? But if you overlay what I have in the blue box here, appreciative inquiry. So appreciative inquiry puts more of a personal touch on it and it puts more of a positive spin on how you go in and conduct an organizational assessment. So just to kind of sum it up, appreciative inquiry shows you how to look at glasses being half full instead of half empty. So affirmative competence, that's the capacity for an organization or individual to see how things were done that went well in the past. Generative competence is just the capacity for looking at how benefits, impacts of benefits of a transformational effort. Collaborative competence, that's the capacity just to work well with others. And expansive competency, in some ways, just thinking outside the box, getting you to think outside of the normal way of thinking. In the green box, we have 3 leadership traits. So I focus at Bucky Graduate University when they actually train and develop transformational leaders. They have 8 perspectives that they teach. But I chose these 3 because I think these are 3 core traits that can be used across multiple sectors. So not just in the government workspace, but you can use it in a nonprofit workspace. You can use it in communities. You can use it in school systems. Global leadership, that's just leading with a global perspective. But the touch point with global leadership, with what we kind of discussed here at SEF, is diversity, embracing diversity. So if I'm going to lead in a global context, I need to be able to embrace diversity, embrace everybody from all walks of life, from all different backgrounds. Serving leadership, serving me by serving others. So when I think about serving leadership, I think about Mother Teresa. That is a perfect example of what serving leadership should look like. And lastly, contextual leadership. That's just to look at past experiences, past challenges, and see how you can apply those to the current leadership challenges that you all face. So, also in the call-out box here, I have moral compass and values. This is important because, depending on how you were raised, how you were brought up, you develop some of those leadership instincts and some of those leadership behaviors that teaches you how to choose the hard right or the easy wrong, even when nobody's looking. So if that moral compass isn't vectored where it needs to be, then we probably just need a leadership training. But that's where it all starts with how you were raised, those values that you learned growing up. That moral compass is your foundation. So some of the benefits that you see here with transformational leadership, and I'll just touch on these very quickly because I want to kind of talk about some of the practical applications for how we kind of use transformational leadership to kind of impact our workforce. So I kind of talked about the ability to identify change. That's similar to the Six Sigma framework that I just talked about. But you want to be able to do that at multiple levels, so operationally and also strategically. Increase workforce morale. If you keep the part right that was in that yellow call-out box.
So shortly, the video will get back into talking about the culture intelligence model. But this also is good for you to see this part of the video because it shows you linkages to transformational leadership.
That is critical. I mean, that's not something that you can just go to training and just learn how to improve overnight. That's just something that kind of takes time to learn how to read personalities, learn how to read emotions. Maximizing team capabilities and capacity. I had an asterisk there because that actually has touch points to the strategic dimension of that strategic triangle that we talked about here at SEF. So if you think about that strategic triangle, you have goals at the top, you have internal capabilities, then you have external support. So with that being said, you can make an inference that transformational leadership has positive impacts also with strategic planning. Developing self-sustaining capabilities. We want to teach individuals or organizations how they can kind of help themselves. So this framework teaches you how to do that. Blending leadership and management. So this is a good one because this is probably a topic that probably resonates pretty loudly with all of us. So we use leadership and management interchangeably quite a bit. But there is a difference, and I will also tell you that you need leadership and management to keep momentum going in your organizations for a positive manner. So the leadership, that's just getting a group of people and moving forward to the same purpose, the same common goal. Management, that's maintaining policies, maintaining procedures, maintaining those day-to-day operations. But you have to have both in your organization to keep things moving, keep that momentum going. So the way I look at that, you know, I think about riding a bicycle. You know, you have both feet on the pedal. So with leadership and management, since you got to have both, there's going to be different times you have to have more of an emphasis with one and less emphasis on the other. Both working together to keep going in the same direction, that positive momentum. You have to have both. But as you become a better transformational leader, you'll also understand how you can blend the two. But that's critical. The last bullet, organizational culture. That has been a topic that's been discussed quite a bit here at SEF. A lot of you have mentioned organizational culture as a leadership challenge at your organizations.
So I want to pause for just a second because culture was a huge challenge discussed while my time there at Harvard. And so this next segment of this particular video will get into how I use that model at a federal organization called the Defense Logistics Agency and how it's improved culture over time. So thank you. Just bear with me for just a second. It's really going to get into that culture piece that we've been speaking about.
So I want to show you how we kind of use transformational leadership to kind of help us at the Human Resources Director at DLA. And by the way, that's probably the best human resource in the federal government. DLA, they know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So let me just get right into it. All right, so before I talk to you about this slide, let me just give you a little bit of context first. This slide was actually a direct extract from the culture action plan that we use at my organization. I'm actually the culture champion of my organization. So as I orient you to the slide and you look at some of those transformational leadership themes, you'll see that it makes sense for me to serve as the culture champion of my organization. The data that you see on the slide actually represents a research-based approach for how we kind of manage culture in our organization. I will stop here and tell you there are similar culture models out there. We at DLA, we chose this model because this model aligns very cleanly to our strategic plan that we have in our organization. So organizational culture is actually a goal that we have in our agency's strategic plan. So this kind of tells you a level of support and a level of visibility that we have with organizational culture at DLA. You have two wheels here. The more color in the wheel, the more positive your culture is. So you see results from 2014 and you see results from 2016. And as you can see, the color got more colorful between those two survey cycles. 4 main quadrants. You have adaptability, mission, involvement, and consistency. But within each one of those quadrants, you also have sub-quadrants. So creating change, vision, coordination and integration, capability development. Those things sound familiar? They do. Those things overlay very nicely with transformational leadership themes. And since I'm fortunate enough to actually serve as the culture champion, and I'm a transformational leadership expert in my organization, I have more of an opportunity to kind of influence what goes into that culture, that action planning process. So basically what happens is we do a comparative analysis between survey cycles and look to see where we can have gaps. And just for this particular survey cycle, we had one area that went down, from the previous survey cycle, that's coordination and integration. We lost 5 points. All the other areas, they either went up or we kind of maintained between that survey cycle. But, when we put together an action plan, we don't want to just look at just the areas that decrease. We want to look at those areas that we can sustain also. We want to keep that momentum going. So when we take the next survey cycle, 18 months from now, hopefully I have a full color wheel. Hopefully with some of the transformational leadership emphasis that I put in the action plan, I'm pretty confident that we'll see that. So we do the comparative analysis, and based off those gaps, we created a pretty robust action plan. Now this is just another extract from our culture plan, and it only really addresses one area, which is coordination and integration, which was a theme across DLA where we kind of had problems with trying to resolve in terms of culture. So when we put this action item together, it's specific, measurable, and actionable items that we put in our plan. So, and I won't train this slide, but some of the themes that we have in here is centralized information management, lean review of all our existing processes, restructuring some of our staff calls so we can make sure that the information flow is a little bit more clean. And you see in there that cross-functional process management framework that I kind of explained to you earlier. And then, of course, we have some of the expected impact, increased awareness of how work impacts others. We kind of talked about working in silos. So in a lot of cases, you might have a director who sits right next or right down off from another director, and they don't talk. So one kind of way to kind of get around this is we got them all together in a room, all those directors in a room, and we did a stakeholder analysis. Internal stakeholder analysis and then external stakeholder analysis. Because in some cases, my teammate is sitting on my left may not understand that if she's sitting on or holding an action, how it impacts my team or how it impacts some of the deliverables I have. But having that cross-functional process framework and a stakeholder analysis, it just increased awareness of how work impacts others. All right, as I get ready to wrap this up, I just want to share a few transformational leadership quotes, with you all. Some of these names may sound familiar. I know we kind of talked about Peter Drucker, since we've been here. But I also want to just leave you with one other example of how transformational leadership has been kind of, put into like practical use. And it's the guy that's been right here before you. I kind of think about transformational leadership as being a reversible T-shirt. You can use it to kind of help improve an organization, but once you flip it around, you can also use it to help yourself. Since I started my journey with Lockheed Martin University, I can tell you that as I studied transformational leadership, I have become a better man, a better leader, a better professional, and my relationship with God got better too, because of some of those principles that you learn with transformational leadership. Hopefully, the things I shared with you all today and the reflections you guys have here in the course, it's my hope that moving forward, transformational leadership resonates a little bit more sound with you all too. I also want to go on the record and say, Denise, you had the courage to get in front of us and share your challenge with organizational culture. So I'm going to take some of the best practices I have with organizational culture. I'm going to pass it on to you, and I'm going to see if I can help you with culture at your organization also. So I'll go on the record and say that from my colleagues, I got you back.
Questions, so I'm not sure we speak into the microphone because we do have, I think, about 10 people online, so they can't hear your question unless you speak into the microphone.
Go ahead, Drew.
So the next segment of this video, we won't launch the rest of it, but it kind of got into some question and answers that the audience asked. How come I launched the culture survey only once every 18 months? And the reason for that is because, that's probably about right in terms of how long it takes to really get through being able to generate, those action plans and getting through some of that stuff. I was also asked what I thought was one of my biggest challenges with instituting that culture framework. And I think the biggest challenge I can probably highlight is really being able to parse out culture and organizational effectiveness issues from climate. But this particular model allows you to be able to do that. And so I don't want to, belabor this particular segment of the video with going through those details, but I did paste the link in a previous slide if you guys want to go back and visit that video in its entirety. So with that said, this concludes this course. I want to thank you all for joining me, and look forward to helping you improve culture at your organizations. So with that, have a great rest of your day.